Previously on as Bungie Burns, Marathon Edition. Also, was that the Osmondius poem?
My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair.
The poem about the ravages of time and the end of empires. Would that be situational irony or dramatic irony? The through line here is, of course, Bungie and their legacy. If I was Bungie, I probably wouldn't court that particular albatross, and I'd definitely be knocking on some wood. And now, the conclusion. What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians, runners, people of all ages? Joker back again, once again, and today, people, today on this episode of As the Bungie Burns.
Walk out the door, you see someone that you know, and they ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Oh, it's bad. Boss, I'm tired of always being right. I kid. I love this shit. Now, stop me if you've heard this before, though, of course, this is a video, so you can't really do that, but you know, hey, details. Bungie leadership reportedly ignored Marathon devs' warnings for years about what would work and what wouldn't work, along with their request to add PvE component to the game. Ex-Bungie dev says Marathon leadership was extremely toxic and humiliating to work with. Bungie leadership needs to be gutted completely. The vibe has never been worse. New report details Bungie's morale in freefall after Marathon art theft claims. All they needed to do was add studio views Marathon as make or break, and we'd have the same sort of emotional blackmail quip we see every time Destiny releases a new DLC. Marathon Alpha draws new plagiarism accusations against Bungie as artist says game is plastered with stolen art. Now, I should note that all those article titles are taken from Paul Tassi articles, but the Game Post articles made it way easier to edit. However, longtime viewers of the channel shouldn't be shocked over these headlines at all.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
3 months ago, I did a nearly 3-hour-long video detailing 30 years of bad, incompetent Bungie management. That video is sitting at a kind of respectable, for my channel, 64K views.
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers.
If you haven't seen it, or if you're interested in 30 years of Bungie management, take a look. Link will be in the description below. Oh, and controversial former Bungie board of directors and composer Marty O'Donnell commented on the video, more or less confirming most of my assertions, including my sneaking suspicion that Jason Jones was an Elric Amel Benet fan. Now, of course, grain of salt. Take that for what it's worth to you personally.
Marty makes pretty much everything we do twice as good, and that makes me really angry because he's just about the only individual who has that level of contribution to the team, but I would never say that to him.
But I, as I am oft want to do, digress. Where do we start? This is a target-rich environment. There are so many articles, so many things going on surrounding Marathon that I could easily make 10-minute videos of each and every topic. And yet, here we are. People have the audacity to say, I just do this for the money. No, I just really love the game. But where do we start? I guess we could always start with Bungie's most recent, what could only be called a disastrous exercise in humiliation kink? I mean, live stream.
Yeah, and wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the events from yesterday. It came to our attention, and sorry, I wrote this, I wanted to make sure I get this message right. It came to our attention that an artist who worked on Marathon in the...
Oh, this is a $4 billion company and they can't even keep their audio in tune for a live stream. What? Also, wasn't that just the tweet the Marathon team put out? I mean, I guess it does say dev team, so technically speaking, all things being fair, he could have written it and tweeted it and then decided to read it again on stream.
In the early stages of pre-production.
Wait, hold on. I gotta fix this audio.
Took a number of graphic elements from a graphic designer without permission or acknowledgement, and placed them on a decal sheet that was then checked in 2020. The decal sheet included icons and text elements. These elements ended up in our alpha build, and there's absolutely no excuse for this oversight, and we are working on and 100% committed to our review process to ensure instances like this don't happen again. on Marathon or at Bungie.
Good enough. I'm not a $4 billion company. Now, for those of you who have somehow missed it because every video is somebody's first, what's Bungie yapping on about? Well, turns out they got caught with their hands in the proverbial cookie jar. And by cookie jar, I mean somebody else's Twitter account stealing their art. Not for the first time, not for the second time, not even for the third time. And this is before we consider all the Elric Melnibene coincidences. Which brings us to an interesting point in our video. What is the difference between plagiarism and inspiration? Something that's not as cut and dry as I think people assume it is. When we talk about plagiarism versus inspiration, it doesn't matter what you or I think is fair or right or just. It matters what precedent is. Now, to be 150% clear for those of you who can't comprehend breakfast, this is all purely academic. Anti-Real, at time of recording, as far as I'm aware of, has no plan of suing. So this is all for our benefit. It's for entertainment. However, just because there won't be any issues from Anti-Real's end, that doesn't necessarily mean there won't be issues from Sony's end. Sony may have a thing or two to say about the current state of Bungie and Marathon. You know, like one of the ongoing rumors at time of recording that says Sony has basically canceled Marathon's marketing, which means one of two things. One, Marathon's getting delayed. Two, Bungie's on their own. And all of this is before we get into Bungie or Marathon's reputation within the court of opinion. And that's ultimately what matters. We'll talk about it more later, but it doesn't matter to your average person how much you want to delude or delineate Bungie's culpability when it comes to Marathon's plagiarism. No one really cares. Or I should say, no one is going to put in the effort to bother caring about how much it but actually was. It doesn't matter if it was 10%, 20%, 30%, 99%, 100%. All that matters is that it was. For all intents and purposes, the story is that Bungie stole Anti-Real's art. That's it. That's all that matters in the court of public opinion. Why? Because Bungie is a multi-billion-dollar corporation who's burnt a bunch of goodwill, screwing their player base for the better part of a decade. That's the story. Bungie, multi-billion-dollar corporation, responsible for Destiny and the Destiny Content Vault, which locked away hundreds of dollars from paying customers, is also responsible for stealing the intellectual property of an independent artist on Twitter. There's your headline. That's all that people care about. Also, just in case it wasn't blatantly obvious, while I may know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two about how the court of public opinion works, I'm no legal scholar. I know, gas, shock, horror, lightning crackle, revelation! Nothing I'm about to say constitutes legal advice, and is only here for entertainment and educational purposes, to demonstrate to people that things may not be as cut and dry as they would like to think they are. Get it, got it good? Moving forward. So for the sake of argument and to drive the point home, I'm going to use two very extreme examples. The first, National Comics Publication versus Fawcett Publication Incorporated over Superman and Captain Marvel, also known as Shazam. The second is Rob Liefeld versus Marvel Comics fighting American. TLDR on this one is in 1938, National Comics, now DC Comics, introduced Superman. Fawcett Comics would debut Captain Marvel in 1939. Captain Marvel would become way more popular than Superman. Well, as I'm sure you can guess, DC Comics, national publications at the time, was not too terribly happy about being outsold by somebody they viewed to be a carbon copy of Superman, even though he wasn't. I don't think I need to spell out the differences between Superman and Shazam, but just in case, Superman's an alien and all his stories take place while he's an adult. Shazam is a kid who turns into an adult when he says Shazam, and all his powers are based on the Greek gods. People familiar with the characters, they're probably going, yeah, they're not alike at all. Well, after a drawn-out legal fight between 1941 and 1945, the courts found that Shazam was indeed an infringement on Superman's copyright. Fawcett Comics, more or less, basically lost their lawsuit because, as the kids say, they lost the vibe check. It's ridiculous. It was ridiculous then. It's ridiculous now. It is what it is, though. I know, crazy. Our second case involves Rob Liefeld, the co-founder of Image Comics, creator of Deadpool, lover of way too many pouches, and drawler of terrible feet, versus Marvel Comics over the character fighting American. So Rob Liefeld worked on Captain America for a while. Then, after parting ways with Marvel, he began publishing Fighting American, who looked and acted very similar to Captain America. Marvel then alleged that this was an attempt to capitalize on Captain America's likeness and brand. There's a little more to it than that. There was some unused art for a Captain America comic Marvel didn't pay him for, so Rob Liefeld basically filed off the serial numbers, you know, exactly what Bungie does with a lot of things, and then republished it under Fighting American. And we all know how that went. Marvel wasn't too terribly happy, so they took him to court. The lawsuit was settled out of court in 1997, and the terms basically came down to, you can publish Fighting America, but if he throws the shield, we own your ass. And for the record, this more or less boiled down to kinda sort of the same name, and kinda sort of the same likeness, and kinda sort of the same role. Huh, I heard that before. All things considered, that also makes the Red War lawsuit a lot less implausible.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
More so now that Bungie has no evidence More so now that Bungie has no evidence to the contrary, because none of it is in a working state that they can show the judge. Brilliant! So how does this factor into Bungie's art theft? Well, one, they admitted it straight up. Two, and more importantly, while Bungie says that these decal sheets were submitted in 2020, that's literally just take our word for it, bro. As if a company, possibly facing really, really bad legal repercussions, not from Anti-Real, mind you, but from Sony. Yeah, they did what you call in the business a big oopsie scootsy, and Sony's looking at losing a lot of money on this. I cannot imagine Sony is too terribly happy about any of this. And that is kind of what it boils down to. Marathon is tainted fruit. Bungie can say all they want that it was only inspiration, that it was only a couple of decals, that it was one decal sheet from a rogue employee intern who's no longer at the company. While I'm sure people who want to believe it will believe them, the general population probably won't, because the story of the infringement is way more spicy, and because Bungie has spent the better part of a decade torching any and all goodwill they had left over from Halo. So when Bungie comes around and says, trust us, bro, we did an investigation, it's all copacetic, you don't really have a reason to trust them, because they have every reason to lie to you. Now, am I saying they're lying? Of course not. But we'll also never know, and that's the poisonous element to all of this. Like, once you have an accident, twice you have a fault, 3 times is ridiculous, 4, 5 times? Really? Ew, not looking good. Because of that, anyone and everybody could easily just say, actually, well, we know you used their art, we know that you copy-pasted it into the game, so what's to say you didn't start there stealing this art and then reverse engineered your entire look from there? Oh, because one guy happens to like that art style? Weird, he also follows the artist, along with several other Bungie artists, and all of them just conveniently didn't notice? Huh, weird. I also find it interesting that this whole thing started because Anti-Real saw the reveal of Marathon and thought, that looks a little familiar. Now, maybe to the layman, it looks like one homogenized genre and style. I'll give an example. Deus Ex Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, and Cyberpunk 2077. Both games are in the cyberpunk genre, and maybe, just maybe, the layman would be confused about which one's which. But Joker, I hear you cry out in your shrill, tremulous voice. Joe Cross had been drawing in that art style for years. Yes, but and no. Maybe I'm the one being pedantic here, but when I look at Joe Cross's art, and I look at Anti-Real's art, and I look at Marathon, I don't see much of Joe Cross's art in Marathon. I see a lot of Anti-Real's art in Marathon, in the same way that it's pretty easy to distinguish Cyberpunk 2077 from Deus Ex. But hey, I'm sure that this is all just some random cosmic coincidence perpetrated by some out-of-control intern or whatever Bungie is trying to claim. And even if you want to stick to your guns and shout from the top of the hills that Marathon's design language existed before with other mediums like CD covers and Wipeout, it doesn't matter. The proverbial cat is out of the proverbial bag on this. The general perception around Marathon is going to be Bungie stole its style, its aesthetic, and its look from Anti-Real. That's the story. That's what's in the wind. Everything else to your average person is a little more than pedantic whataboutism. Here's an example. We all know that fantasy has been around for forever and a day. And if you want to be more accurate, the modern interpretation of fantasy has been around since Tolkien. This would be around the late 50s, early 60s. In more recent times, fantasy and entertainment just in general has been more and more informed by the success of Game of Thrones. I don't think anybody is going to debate that. Just like I don't think anybody is going to debate, for example, example, that the Halo show was trying very hard to be Game of Thrones, with its gratuitous and pointless nudity, with its POW sex scenes, with its complete and utter disregard for the source material. And yet, you don't have to have watched Game of Thrones or read Game of Thrones to know somebody's ripping off Game of Thrones or trying to be the next Game of Thrones when you see it. You just kinda know. And that's almost kinda worse, because the line between inspiration and plagiarism is often credit or just how much somebody's willing to be bothered. For example, Michael Moorcock, creator of Elric Melniboné. Warhammer 40k, right here. Chaos. They ripped it straight from him. So much so that the symbol that is used for Chaos is Moorcock's 8-pointed star. Here's Moorcock talking about it.
Well, I think Warhammer are simple thieves. I mean, they don't just steal from me, they steal from everybody. So, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's simple theft. It's commercial theft.
Game of Thrones is also heavily inspired by Michael Moorcock. The Valyrians are just Melnibonéans. All the reincarnated heroes that you hear about through Game of Thrones lore is just the Eternal Champion. Magic, oddly crafted, probably used human sacrifice to forge swords that you see in Game of Thrones. Actually, we do know one did use human sacrifice, and it was the hero's lover. Again, that's an Elric Melniboné reference, based off of Elric's sword, Stormbringer, which...
Such a great sword should have a name. What shall I call her? Stormbringer!
The difference is, Moorcock and George R.R. Martin are friends. And George R.R. Martin, as a creator, wears his references on his sleeve. So while there may not be any legal ramifications because Anti-Real has just said they don't have the time, energy, or money for it because that's expensive.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
The narrative in the cultural zeitgeist around Marathon and its art style will forever be that it was stolen, that it was plagiarized from an indie artist on Twitter. But of course, that isn't the only controversy surrounding Marathon, just the spiciest. Even before the plagiarism came to light, the conversation around Marathon was not good, is probably putting it a little too mildly. The reveal stream was honestly amateur hour, as Bungie developers sat around talking about Marathon, but not really saying anything about Marathon. Had it not been thanks to the work of content creators, YouTubers, Twitch streamers, and reporters who got to play and advise on Marathon over the last couple of years, people probably would have been pretty confused about Marathon going into the alpha. Of course, the messaging coming out of the reveal didn't do a lot to inspire confidence. Marathon was a game Bungie wanted to build with its community. No, they said. Wait. And the content creators who went and played Marathon defined what that actually meant. Wait. For example, no proximity chat. The story hadn't quite been written yet.
Story is another big gap right now. Bungie were very upfront about the fact that they've built the narrative framework for Marathon. They haven't written the actual narrative yet.
The ranked mode, which was supposed to revolutionize the genre, only existed as a handful of ideas in someone's head somewhere. Maybe, just maybe, they even got it out onto a whiteboard.
They're 5 months out, and one of the two revolutionary things that they're talking about hasn't been built yet. I'm starting to get the feeling, and this was paired with some of the other stuff that I heard, where they kept saying, like, we're still early, so please provide us your feedback so that we can make improvements and tweak it. They're 5 months out. They're really not that early. And this game has been in production for 6 years. 6.
And everything else hinged on this other Trust Us Bro feature, this mystical, magical, mythical fourth map that wouldn't be releasing with the game. That's not to say that the map wouldn't be finished before the game released. It would just release at a later date. Ah, yes, the games as a service games content model. But you know what, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, maybe, just maybe, none of this mattered. Maybe there was something magical and esoteric about Marathon that you could only discover by playing it. And so the community waited with bated breath for Marathon's alpha to release, and then proceeded to exhale. Not a sigh of relief because all their hopes and dreams and wishes for Marathon had come true, but a sigh of befuddlement at the state of a game 5 months away from release. At the time, people were touting this as the second coming of Concord, another game no one asked for, chasing trends, devoid of soul, designed by committee for the express purpose of squeezing as many dollary dues out of your wallet as Bungie could. While the live service aspect of the game, if history's anything to go by, would be not producing more of the content that customers could come to grow and love, but finishing the development of the game years after the fact. using the players to subsidize the minimally viable product, as all minimally viable products do. Of course, we all know what happens when a minimally viable product fails to shock and amaze and grab people's attention. It's canceled because that's risk management. See the aforementioned Concord or the more heartbreaking Anthem. And with Marathon, things were pretty ugly in real time. The trend data doesn't lie. People fell off playing Marathon quick, fast, and in a hurry. Not just playing it, by the way, but also watching it. Was this because nobody wanted an extraction shooter? Well, no, because Marathon wasn't the only extraction shooter having a test. For you see, we were treated to something that could only be described as the public execution of Marathon by Arc Raiders in real time. As Arc Raiders closed alpha or beta released, interest in Arc Raiders only grew. Viewership only grew as Marathons dwindled. Now, before anybody goes full, but Joker!
You talked about Marathon's art theft, but Embracer Studios uses AI, and that's theft. Why are you going to give them a free pass after shitting all over Marathon for stealing art? It's the same thing.
Oh, that one hurt. So for those of you who do not know, because every video is somebody's first, Embark Studios isn't necessarily free and clear of accusations of theft, as their game, The Finals, landed in hot water for the use of AI voiceover, and it looks like Arc Raiders is going to follow suit. It's unclear how ethically sourced this AI is. Embark Studios has stated that they use a combination of recorded voices and AI voice text-to-speech technology to make their AI voices, and that the AI voices are based on contracted voice actors and even employees, which does imply that there's some form of people being paid for this, but there's been no transparency in regards to contracts and compensation models, such as royalties for the actors after the fact. Now, we're not here to do a purity test in regards to AI, but truth be told, personally speaking, I have no plan of buying Arc Raiders, and I don't play the finals. However, my personal support or condemnation of their use of AI doesn't matter, not for the subject that we're talking about. So people can take their, I'm sure, not so finely crafted whataboutisms and shove them up their ass, and while they're at it, maybe, just maybe, learn to perceive hypotheticals, because it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain something without accepting it. Get it, got it good? Okay, so people generally do not give a fuck about AI voice acting if the game is fun. And in fact, truth be told, Bungie probably could have gotten away with all the art theft if Marathon was fun. So the problem here? People wouldn't have cared if the game was good. The game wasn't good. It also doesn't help that Bungie spent a lot of their goodwill built up from Halo 1, 2, and 3 being amazing on Destiny 1, Destiny 2, and now Marathon being released and even advertised as unfinished products. Nobody wants to go through that 3 times with the nebulous promise that someday, if you're a good pay pig, you'll actually get a feature-rich game. Once again, I'll ask rhetorically, like I did in my last video, how many years did it take for Bungie to give us character recreation in an MMO? How many years did it take for Bungie to give us loadouts in an MMO looter RPG? How many years did it take for Bungie to give us an LFG in an MMO RPG? The better part of a decade. So let's not pretend that Bungie's history isn't riddled with instances of them saying they're going to do something, releasing a half-baked mediocre product, and then maybe, just maybe, fixing that product in 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 10 years. This is a self-inflicted wound. How many years is it going to take for Marathon to get proximity chat, even though everybody says it needs to have it now? I don't know, because Bungie's not working on it. They don't seem interested in it because proximity chat is toxic. And of course they're worried about toxicity because they don't want casual players being told that they suck shit through a straw, because casual players may quit the game. And a casual player not playing the game isn't buying microtransactions, isn't buying season passes, isn't doing this, that, and the other to line Bungie's pocket. So of course we have to remove any of that friction. But hey, just be a pay pig, give them your money, and trust them unquestionably. The state of this game and the state of Bungie is fucking ridiculous, is what it is.
Mr. Joker, there's been a second series of controversies dropped.
Oh, come on, you can't even make this stuff up.
Pain without love, pain. I can't get enough pain. I like it rough.
Originally, that video was going to end out with Bungie's path back to redemption, and I'll go ahead and leave that in for the end of this video. But there's been a couple of developments while I've been editing. So here we are. Things like the Destiny Rising trailer releasing and making the current state of Destiny look like a fucking joke. Or how Bungie HR was working in their own interests. Former employee claims that there were accusations against the company's HR for covering up harassment issues so that they could get a multi-million-dollar exit.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
Then there's news. Bungie leadership reportedly pitched a subscription model for Destiny 2, which was vehemently shut down by staff. News. Everything happening to Bungie is because of greed. Ex-employees hope the studio gets consolidated into Sony, says that's the path forward. In fact, another ex-employee that we've covered on the channel a couple times, Jamie Gersimer, would state, I remember the moment it happened. Studio leadership had decided to make Destiny first person, but third person worked great. Why? It's projected to make more money as a first-person shooter. Oh, so it appears as if you can take Bungie out of the Microsoft, but you can't take the Microsoft out of Bungie. Now, all those headlines, I believe, come from a Destin Legary video, and likely warrants just a little more consideration than the mention at the end of a marathon video. The takeaway, however, is things are not good at Bungie, and the management is completely out of touch. I mean, that's a tale as old as time, sure, but here it comes off as self-destructive. Then again, Bungie also expected that Marathon could achieve a top 5 position on the MPD, so either they were lying to Sony or they were lying to themselves. The leading rumor, and take this with a grain of salt, but it was reported on by IGN, is, and I quote, within the company there's a growing expectation that senior company leadership will leave in droves in the summer of 2026, when the final payouts from Sony's acquisition of the company take effect. With that in mind, there's a strong push to get Marathon out the door before then, and let whoever takes the reins after that, be it Sony or Bungie, worry about how it's sustained. So basically, they want to get the game out so they can get residuals and, well, whatever happens, happens after that. If it's a failure, they don't care because that's somebody else's problem. Now, I don't know, at least until after 2026, if there's a path forward for Bungie, other than being totally absorbed by Sony. And rounding out the shit show of articles we have here, my personal favorite. Bungie leadership thought the cool glows and attractive armor from Trials of Osiris would cut into Eververse sales. The Destiny community has been on my ass for years because I complain about the cash shop and the over-monetization of the game. Well, turns out I was right all along, and the cash shop is the reason we can't have nice things.
Do the thing.
Surprise to absolutely nobody, with a functioning brain above the medulla oblongata, which is apparently a rare occurrence within the Destiny community. And remember back in the day when Joe Blackburn said that each release would have an armor update or armor refresh for every ritual playlist? We got it once, and the next time it was supposed to happen, nothing but crickets. Ultimately, they did make another set, but it would come out that the reason Bungie discontinued making armor for ritual activities was because nobody used it. Nobody liked it. Now I wonder, I sit here all wonder, why is that? Did Bungie purposely design really bad armor so they could point to it and go, oh, but you guys didn't like it before, so we're not gonna waste our time doing that? Makes you think. Really gets the noggin jogging. And this isn't the first time we've heard something like this coming out of Bungie. For example, character recreation at some point likely would have had some form of monetization tied to it. I can already hear the but jokers. But Joker? Final Fantasy has Fantasias. Yes, that's fucking dumb there too. Glad we're on the same page. You shouldn't have to pay money to recreate your character. And it turns out Bungie employees agreed and they fought back against management. This is just another example of the rank and file Bungie employees going to bat for the players. See, my issues are not with the rank and file employees. My issues are with Bungie management. And yes, I'm well aware that that's probably too much of a generalization in and of itself. I'm sure there's bad actors in middle management and the rank and file, and I'm sure there's good actors on the board of directors. However, the good actors are clearly drowned out by the bad actors unless push really comes to shove. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that Bungie management has a change of heart and they want to do right by the fans. How can they do that? Well, I always come back to the Final Fantasy XIV GDC presentation, where they basically spell out how you make an MMO, but honestly, I think there's value here in just how you run a company and make any game. So for starters, Bungie management needs to extract their head from their ass. Then, they need to delay Marathon at least a year, right? And honestly, the real reason they need to delay Marathon marathon a year isn't necessarily to innovate or finish the game, but so a lot of these controversies can go down the memory hole. But a year also gives them time to reinvest into the game, to innovate, to find its core, its identity, and, you know, release a fully fleshed out product. It also allows Bungie time to build goodwill with their community. The next year of Destiny 2 has to be an over-delivery on such a scale it's unprecedented, which it's probably too late for. More so now with Justin Truman's new position. I would say that Destiny needs a golden age, but that ship may have already set sail, so who knows? The fourth step. Go to that Final Fantasy GDC presentation and just internalize the entire thing. Things like, and I'm quoting here, what MMO developers must always be asking themselves. What can other titles do that yours cannot? Do you have enough content? Is anything lacking with the UI? Do you have a long-term update plan? Innovation begins with proper planning and design. Then, in another slide, they talk about the lessons they learned from developing Final Fantasy A Realm Reborn. What we've learned: number 1, never forget the fans. Without them, there would be no us. 2, fun comes first. If it isn't fun, you're doing it wrong. 3, never back down. Always aim to amaze. Quite a difference when compared to Bungie's current mantra of beware over delivery. And finally, don't forget the roots. It's what your fans crave. Another slide talks about the pitfalls developers can fall into, succumbing to the pressures to succeed a second time, stubbornly adhering to outdated policies, ignore past success while incorporating change for change's sake, allowing past success to foster a false sense of security. Oh, that's definitely Bungie. 3 easy steps to failure: an unhealthy obsession with graphic quality, a surprising lack of MMORPG knowledge amongst development team members, the mindset that the solution to every problem could be patched in a future update. Really, you just gotta change MMORPGs to extraction shooters. I don't necessarily know if Bungie has a way back forward with the current management, but at this point, we're all just watching the Bungie dumpster fire burn. So, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Remember to like, but only if you did. Subscribe for more. Feel free to donate to my Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous. And above all else, stay frosty.